Her fingers brushed against his collar, and the world seemed to stop. "Stop staring at my lips like that," she whispered, her voice barely audible in the quiet office hallway. "If you keep looking at me that way, I'll—" The words hung in the air between them, electric with possibility. James Bennet never expected to find himself here, 42 years old, raising his 10-year-old daughter alone after his wife's passing 3 years ago, and now standing breathless in the hallway outside the boardroom where he was about to interview for a position that could change everything for them. The position of marketing director at Meridian Enterprises wasn't just another job, it represented stability, better hours, and the chance to finally be present for Sophie's school events without the constant struggle of his current freelance schedule. He'd been nervously adjusting his tie for the 5th time when Eliza Morgan, the CEO herself, rounded the corner. James recognized her immediately from the company website and business magazines, tall, confident, with intelligent eyes that seemed to see right through pretense. At 38, she'd built Meridian from a struggling startup to one of the most innovative companies in the industry. "You must be James Bennet," she said, extending her hand. Her grip was firm, professional. "Your portfolio impressed everyone on the committee." "Thank you for the opportunity, Ms. Morgan," he managed, suddenly aware of how long it had been since he'd worn a proper suit. The tie felt like it was strangling him. She tilted her head slightly. "Your tie is crooked. May I?" Before he could respond, she stepped forward, her perfume subtle but intoxicating. Her fingers worked deftly at his collar, straightening what his nervous hands had mangled. "First interviews can be nerve-wracking," she said, her voice softer than it had been moments before. "But I've reviewed your work personally. You're here because you deserve to be." James couldn't help but look at her, really look at her. Not as the intimidating CEO whose approval he needed, but as a woman whose kindness had momentarily steadied his racing heart. His eyes drifted to her lips as she spoke, and that's when she paused, catching his gaze. "Stop staring at my lips like that," she whispered, her hands still at his collar. "If you keep looking at me that way, I'll forget we're standing in my company hallway 5 minutes before your interview." The interview went surprisingly well, despite the moment that had passed between them. James spoke passionately about his ideas for Meridian's marketing strategy, drawing on years of experience and the fresh perspective that comes from having worked across multiple industries. When he mentioned adapting his schedule after becoming Sophie's sole parent, he noticed Eliza's expression soften almost imperceptibly. 2 days later, James received the call offering him the position. The salary was better than he'd hoped, and the flexible hours meant he could be home when Sophie returned from school most days. He accepted immediately, pushing away thoughts of Eliza Morgan's hands at his collar, her whispered warning still echoing in his mind. Working at Meridian proved both challenging and rewarding. James threw himself into revitalizing the company's marketing approach, and within months, his campaigns were showing measurable results. He interacted with Eliza primarily in team meetings, both of them maintaining strictly professional behavior. If their eyes occasionally held contact a moment too long, neither acknowledged it. Sophie thrived with the new stability in their lives. For the first time since losing her mother, she had a father who wasn't constantly exhausted or working late into the night. She joined the school science club and made new friends. James treasured their evenings together, helping with homework, cooking dinner, hearing about her day. The wound of their loss remained, but it was no longer the defining feature of their lives. 6 months into his new position, James was working late, finalizing a presentation for a major potential client. Most of the office had emptied hours ago. He rubbed his tired eyes, saving the file before stretching his arms above his head. "You should go home to your daughter," came Eliza's voice from his office doorway. James startled slightly. "Ms. Morgan. I didn't realize you were still here." "Eliza, please. It's after hours." She stepped into his office, elegant even after a 14-hour day. "The Westfield presentation?" He nodded. "Just putting the finishing touches on it. I've been meaning to tell you, your work these past months has exceeded even my expectations." She leaned against his desk, closer than she'd allowed herself to be since that day in the hallway. The board is extremely pleased. Thank you. That means a lot coming from you. How's Sophie adjusting to your new schedule? The question surprised him. She's doing really well. She's building a model of the solar system for the science fair next week. Our living room looks like NASA exploded in it. Eliza laughed, a genuine sound that transformed her face. I remember those projects. My father was useless with them, always at the office. My mother would end up helping me the night before they were due. I'm trying to avoid being that dad, James admitted. It's why I appreciate the flexibility here so much. Something shifted in her expression. My father built an incredible company, but he missed my entire childhood doing it. I promised myself Meridian would be different, that success wouldn't require that sacrifice. The personal revelation hung between them. James realized how little he actually knew about her beyond her professional accomplishments. Would you like to see a picture? He asked, reaching for his phone. Of Sophie's project, I mean. Eliza moved closer as he scrolled to find the photo. Her shoulder brushed against his, and he caught that same subtle perfume from months ago. He found the picture, Sophie grinning proudly beside a half-completed Jupiter, and held it up. She has your smile, Eliza said softly. Her mother's eyes, though, James replied, the familiar ache in his chest when he spoke of Claire. Eliza's gaze met his. You must miss her very much. Every day. But it gets, not easier, exactly. Different. Sophie helps, she's so much like her mother sometimes it takes my breath away. How did she? Eliza began, then stopped herself. I'm sorry, that's too personal. No, it's okay, James said, surprised to find he meant it. Cancer. It was quick, only 4 months from diagnosis to after. Sometimes I think that was a mercy, other times I wish we'd had more time to prepare, to say goodbye properly. Eliza's hand covered his on the desk, warm and steady. I lost my mother last year. Heart attack. No warning at all. I'm sorry, James said, turning his hand to squeeze hers gently. They sat in companionable silence for a moment, connected by shared grief. Would you like to get coffee sometime? Eliza asked suddenly. Outside of work, I mean. James felt his heart rate quicken. I'd like that. Their first coffee date lasted 3 hours. They talked about everything except work, books they loved, places they'd traveled, the challenges of losing a parent. Eliza spoke about growing up with a father who was physically present but mentally always at the office, and how it shaped her determination to create a different kind of corporate culture. James shared stories of his early days as a single father, the mistakes and small victories. Sophie asked if I was on a date, James admitted as they walked back toward the office. When I left this morning. Eliza raised an eyebrow. What did you tell her? The truth. That I was having coffee with my boss, and I wasn't sure if it was a date or not. She laughed. And what did she say to that? She said, and I quote, Dad, if you have to ask, you're already doing it wrong. Eliza's laughter echoed in the street. Smart girl. Too smart sometimes, James agreed. She also told me to make sure I didn't wear the blue tie because it makes me look like her principal. Brutal honesty. I like her already. They reached the building, both hesitating at the entrance. So, James said, was this a date? Eliza smiled. I think your daughter is right. If you have to ask. Their relationship developed slowly, carefully. Coffee dates became dinner dates, always scheduled around Sophie's routine. Eliza insisted on meeting at restaurants rather than having James pick her up, conscious of maintaining appropriate boundaries as his employer. They kept their personal relationship strictly separate from work, professional and focused during office hours. 3 months after their first coffee, James invited Eliza to Sophie's school science fair. It was a significant step, the first time she would meet his daughter. "Are you sure?" Eliza asked when he extended the invitation. "That's a big moment." "Sophie's been asking about you," James admitted. "I think she's curious about the woman who makes her dad smile at his phone." The science fair was crowded with parents and excited children. Sophie stood proudly beside her solar system model, now complete with all 9 planets. She had insisted on including Pluto despite its demotion. "Dad," she called when she spotted him. Her eyes widened slightly when she saw Eliza beside him. "Is this her?" she stage whispered. James felt himself blush. "Sophie, this is Eliza." "Eliza, this is my daughter, Sophie." "I've heard so much about you," Eliza said, extending her hand formally, which made Sophie giggle. "Your solar system is impressive." "Thanks. Dad helped with the structure, but I painted all the planets myself." "Did you know Jupiter has a storm that's been going for over 300 years? The Great Red Spot," Eliza nodded. "I did a project on Jupiter when I was about your age." Sophie's eyes lit up. "Really? Did you win?" "Second place," Eliza admitted. "A boy named Trevor built a working volcano that erupted during judging. Hard to compete with that kind of drama." Sophie laughed, then leaned closer to Eliza. "Dad says you're really smart and run a whole company." "Your dad is pretty smart himself," Eliza replied. "He's helped our company a lot." Sophie considered this, then asked with the directness only children can manage, "Do you like my dad?" Like him?" "Sophie," James began, mortified. "It's okay," Eliza said, meeting Sophie's gaze steadily. "Yes, I do like your dad. Very much. Is that okay with you?" Sophie studied her for a long moment. "My mom died," she said finally. "I know," Eliza said softly. "My mom died too. It's really hard, isn't it?" Sophie nodded, something passing between them that James couldn't quite interpret. "Dad burned dinner twice this week," Sophie informed her. "He's not very good at cooking." "Hey!" James protested. "I'm not great at cooking either," Eliza confessed. "But I make excellent reservations." Sophie giggled, then turned serious again. "He gets sad sometimes. When he thinks I'm not looking." James felt his throat tighten. He hadn't realized Sophie had noticed. "I imagine you do too," Eliza said gently. "That's okay. Sad is part of remembering people we love." Sophie nodded solemnly. "You can come see my room sometime if you want. I have pictures of my mom there." It was an invitation more meaningful than any adult could have extended, and Eliza clearly understood its significance. "I'd be honored," she said, her voice slightly unsteady. The relationship between Eliza and Sophie developed its own rhythm, separate from her relationship with James. They bonded over books and science, Eliza never trying to replace Claire but creating her own connection with the girl. Sometimes James would find them huddled together, giggling over something on Sophie's tablet or discussing the merits of different ice cream flavors with intense seriousness. 6 months after the science fair, James was preparing dinner, successfully, despite Sophie's claims about his cooking skills, when Eliza arrived for their regular Friday night meal together. "Something smells amazing," she said, kissing him briefly. "Dad's making lasagna," Sophie announced from the living room where she was setting the table. "It's the only thing he doesn't mess up." High praise, Eliza laughed. Dinner was filled with comfortable conversation. Sophie dominated much of it, sharing school stories and her plans for the upcoming summer break. After they finished eating, she disappeared to her room to call a friend, leaving James and Eliza alone in the kitchen. "I have something to ask you," James said as they washed dishes together. "Sounds serious," Eliza replied, bumping her hip against his playfully. "It is, actually." He dried his hands and reached into his pocket, pulling out a small velvet box. I've been carrying this around for 2 weeks waiting for the right moment. Eliza's hands stilled in the soapy water. James. He opened the box, revealing a simple but elegant ring. I love you, Eliza. Sophie loves you. We both want you in our lives, permanently, officially. You know this will complicate things at work, she said, but her eyes never left the ring. I've already spoken to HR about reporting structure adjustments. And the board, actually. Her eyebrows shot up. You spoke to my board? I wanted to do this right, he said simply. No conflicts of interest, no whispers of favoritism. Always the thorough one, she murmured, finally pulling her hands from the water and drying them slowly. Is that a yes? He asked, his heart pounding. I haven't heard a question yet, she teased, though her voice trembled slightly. James dropped to one knee, holding the ring up. Eliza Morgan, will you marry me? Will you join our family? Yes, she whispered, tears gathering in her eyes. Yes to both. As he slipped the ring onto her finger, they heard a small gasp from the doorway. Sophie stood there, eyes wide. Did you ask her? She demanded of her father. Did she say yes? You knew about this? Eliza asked, laughing through her tears. Dad said he had to ask me first, because we're a package deal, Sophie explained, bouncing on her toes. I said yes weeks ago. What took you so long? James pulled his daughter into their embrace. I was nervous, he admitted. I told you she'd say yes, Sophie said with the confidence of youth. She looks at you the same way you look at her. And how's that? Eliza asked, curious. Sophie wrinkled her nose. All mushy and gross. Like in those movies Aunt Jenny watches. They both laughed, holding each other close, this newly formed family unit. Their wedding was small and intimate, held in the botanical garden where they'd had their third date. Sophie served as both flower girl and her father's best person, taking both roles very seriously. In her speech at the reception, she thanked Eliza for making Dad happy again and for helping me with math because Dad is hopeless with fractions. Life settled into new patterns. They moved into a larger house midway between Sophie's school and the Meridian offices. James was promoted to Chief Marketing Officer, reporting to the board rather than directly to Eliza to maintain professional boundaries. They established family traditions, Sunday morning pancakes, monthly movie nights, summer camping trips. It wasn't always smooth. Sophie had moments of missing her mother intensely, sometimes feeling guilty for loving Eliza. James occasionally struggled with comparing his two marriages, wondering if Claire would approve of the life they'd built. Eliza had to learn to balance her natural drive and ambition with her new role as a stepmother and wife. But through it all, they communicated honestly, faced challenges together, and built something beautiful from the broken pieces of their past lives. 5 years after that moment in the hallway when Eliza had fixed James's tie, they stood in that same spot, now renovated as part of Meridian's expanded headquarters. Do you remember? James asked, straightening her blazer before an important investor meeting. How could I forget? She smiled. You looked so nervous. I was terrified, he admitted. Not just of the interview. Of what I felt when you touched me. She reached up to adjust his tie, an echo of that first touch. And now? Now I'm just grateful, he said simply. For second chances. For the family we've built. Stop staring at my lips like that, she whispered, echoing her words from years before. If you keep looking at me that way, I'll have to kiss you right here in the hallway, and we both have meetings in 5 minutes. James smiled, leaning forward to kiss her anyway. Some things are worth being late for. Life doesn't always give us what we expect. Sometimes it takes away what we love most, leaving us to rebuild from the ashes. But sometimes, if we're brave enough to keep our hearts open, it gives us something new, not a replacement for what was lost, but a different kind of beautiful. James and Eliza found that together, creating a family bond.